Thank you guys for joining me for part 7 of the auction, where we're covering Sunrisers Hyderabad, one of the most stable teams in the auction, according to Nakul. Just he said it off camera. So why don't you start, Nakul? Why are they so good and how are they so stable?
They are one of the teams that have in all of T20 cricket that have the most recognizable game plan. You could almost look at how they set up and how they play and recognize it as Sunrisers even without their kits. You look at the auction, they let go 5 players, I think none of whom played a game for them last year, and they brought in 3 players, and now they've had this one swap. They have this solid core of players. They have this very set game plan, and that's how they play, and that hasn't changed with the change of management with Trevor Bayliss taking over. They've got a lot of very experienced and high class international top order players. They've got Rashid Khan, and they've got a very strong Indian bowling lineup led by Bhuvneshwar Kumar, and that's been the case for the last several years. And it's why they've been, I think, in a curious way, it's been why they've been very much at the similar level. They are very consistently in the playoffs, but they haven't quite had that spark of magic to be able to get them over the line, and in terms of winning the tournament for a few years.
Yeah, Monty. So what can Sunrisers do different this year to make that step up from being a playoff team to being a winner?
Yeah, look, I think the introduction of Jason Roy is going to be crucial because he's done well and he's in sort of safe hands with Johnny Bairstow. They're both obviously done very well for England together. But for me, I think the key difference is going to be Jason Holder. I think he gets that. He just bowls really well. He can bat. Can do a good, effective job, and that I would use him as that sort of guy. Open the bowling at the start, possibly. Try and get a few overs out of him. But his real role will be, if you can, just get Sunrisers over the line at 6 or 7. I think he's got that ability to do that. So again, a lot of teams are just sort of get themselves into winning positions, but to get over the line, that's going to be is a huge difference between that and some of the other teams, which are obviously they just know how to sort of win from key positions. So that could be I think a pivotal role for whoever has that with Sunrisers Hyderabad.
Holder made a massive difference to the Sunrisers when he came into the tournament partway through batting. I'd actually quite like to see him batting a bit further up. During the CPL, he batted at 4 and was really impressive. And it means that he's not having to constantly firefight and not having to constantly make up for a collapse, which is, frankly, the role he's been doing with the West Indies for a number of years. I think he looks a little bit more freed up now that he's no longer West Indies captain. He's shouldered that responsibility for a very long time. And the fact that he's now bowling with Bhuvneshwar Kumar this year, Bhuvi will hopefully be fit for the tournament. Bhuvi was outstanding during the England-India series. Showed it looked like he'd never been away, and he was unhittable at times at the top and at death. And him fit for the full season, it means that you can have Holder bowling a lot at the top, you can have Bhuvi bowling top and tail, and then you've got Rashid Khan for the middle overs, and then you slot in guys like Siddharth Kaul around him, Sandeep Sharma, Khalil Ahmed, the Natarajan as well, obviously for the so the bowling attack kind of takes care of itself. The problem, the only slight the slight balancing act is that Holder in, Rashid Khan in, presumably David Warner in if he's fit, which means that you can only play one of Williamson, Bairstow, Roy. It means that you're probably losing out on power in the batting lineup, and you're having to be very they have to bat in a very specific way, which means they're probably not going to be racking up monster scores, which does, of course, then put pressure on the bowling attack. So they're an interesting balancing act. There's some David Warner is back as captain this year. He might not be fit for the whole tournament. There's he's had this groin injury which has been plaguing him for a little while. But as Monty said, they've now got Jason Roy. They've got Bairstow. Both of them would walk into any team in the world other than the Sunrisers. Williamson just keeps keeping them out, even though he doesn't necessarily fit the profile of a traditional T20 player. But he's been so effective for them that they can't leave him out, and he's so adaptable. So we'll see. I think we could well see, like last year for the Sunrisers, is that their batting lineup looks odd on paper. I think, but what is my slight worry for the Sunrisers is that they will lack that power, and they will lack that acceleration that some other teams may have. I mean, they're starting the tournament on quite slow pitches. 5 games in Chennai, 4 games in Delhi, which should help them a little bit because those aren't necessarily high scoring pitches. Maybe they try and get an extra spinner into the attack to try and help Rashid Khan out. Mohammed Nabi is a potential option. You've got some guys like Shahbaz Ahmed and Suchit who they've kept hold of, and then the latter stage of the tournament's on faster pitches in Kolkata and Bangalore. I'm not wholly convinced by the Sunrisers, but I think they'll be a very difficult team to beat.
Yeah, so obviously Sunrisers have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to their overseas batting. But in terms of bowling, what we've seen, Monty, is that when last year they didn't have Bhuvi, who was injured, the oppositions figured out that if they played out Rashid Khan's 4 overs and didn't lose any wickets to him, they could attack the other 16 overs. Now, as a spinner, as the X factor, let's just say, for Rashid Khan to have Bhuvneshwar Kumar back, who's also not easy to hit, how much easier will it become for him to take wickets, knowing, obviously with batsmen knowing that now they don't have those 16 overs to go after, because obviously Bhuvneshwar Kumar himself is a top bowler. How much does that help someone like Rashid Khan?
Well, I think Rashid Khan has always been the type of bowler where he can, single-handedly win games. He actually helps the other bowlers, in fact, and I think that's the thing with Rashid Khan. So that's why Sunrisers Hyderabad, you can't, just take him out of the equation because of Rashid Khan. He's a brilliant. His batting's developed nicely, but his bowling is where he's going to obviously win games. And having Bhuvneshwar Kumar back, into playing the whole season. You can just see that it's that final jigsaw piece, really, isn't it? With what they were missing, and Mohammed Nabi as well there. So they've got really good options. I think again the batting, you want the likes of either Johnny Bairstow, Jason Roy, David Warner will hopefully expect him to do well. These guys, just if they can start firing, then it could be the team that you tend to sort of never talk about Sunrisers Hyderabad in the same context like Mumbai Indians or Delhi Capitals. It's always the forgotten team, even though they've got some great players. Unless hopefully, this year they can actually, play to their potential and actually, challenge to win the trophy.
It's just a question with Sunrisers about the balance, about how they balance those overseas players. If you were allowed 5 overseas players, the Sunrisers would walk the tournament. There's no doubt about that because of the depth of quality they've got. But they can't do that. They can't fit in all of their best top order players, and they've got to work out how that goes. Either they leave themselves short with the batting, or they leave themselves short with the bowling, which might be more of an option this year because they've got Bhuvi and they've got Rashid Khan available, so they might not need someone like Holder or Nabi quite as much. But it'll be fascinating to see how they go. I just worry about them hitting that very top level of batting that some of the other teams can.
And also, last season where they struggled in the middle order was Vijay Shankar not firing and Abhishek Sharma obviously struggling. And Abdul Samad, who had a couple of good games, but then wasn't firing either. So obviously they've gone into the auction and they needed an Indian middle order batsman, all-rounder, lower middle order batsman, and they've gone for Kedar Jadhav in the auction. Do you see him fitting into that 11 and improving the 11 at all?
Neither, I'm afraid. Kedar Jadhav has done some good things for India over the years, for the last few years, but his overall IPL and T20 strike rate is not great. It's pretty pedestrian. He doesn't have that ability to go hard from ball one that you need. I think he's a backup to a backup, and was a useful option for the money. In that sense, one of the overseas guys we haven't talked about actually is Mujib. If Rashid Khan gets injured, God forbid, or they decide they want an extra spinner on those slower pitches in Chennai and Delhi, Mujib is a fantastic option for someone. But I think he again falls into the category of quality overseas players in the wrong team. But I don't particularly see that Kedar Jadhav adds much. They'll need more from Manish Pandey, Abdul Samad, Vijay Shankar, Abhishek Sharma. They'll need more from Priyam Garg played a few games for them last year, the under-19 player. Virat Singh is also an under-19, former India under-19 player. They'll need more from whoever is in those roles below, kind of bridging the gap between the top order and Rashid Khan. Just whoever they pick is going to need to perform better than they did last year.
Yeah, and just along those lines, Monty, if you were picking the Sunrisers 11 tomorrow, who's that player you would trust in that middle order from those riches that Sunrisers have, the Indian all-rounder that you would trust to bat there?
Well, look, Sunrisers are a team of heavy hitters. They guys like hit the ball and they like they can chase 200. They're a team that they can chase 200. They can bowl a side out. They've got everything. All options tick. But then you ask yourself the question: why don't they make the playoffs? Why aren't they? I think after Mumbai Indians, Sunrisers Hyderabad are probably the strongest team. And it's because this heavy reliance on the overseas players. Simple as that. They haven't got young Indian domestic players coming in. The likes, you look at the Mumbai Indian side, you have Kishan, you have Suraj Kumar, who can get into the T20 teams, but there's not many sort of Sunrisers Hyderabad, domestic players that are in the Indian sort of national setup because of how they just rely heavily on Rashid Khan and David Warner, who's won the Orange Cup, a few times, probably the most than anyone else. So this is that reliance on individual performances getting them through to, win the games. And I think all good IPL teams have young domestic players coming through because that sort of strengthens, the team.
Yeah, and I want to come to you, Nakul, because obviously they have quite a young Indian contingent with Abhishek Sharma only 20 years old. You mentioned Abdul Samad, he's 19, Priyam Garg's 20. So can we expect any one of them to have a breakout season in your opinion?
Abdul Samad is probably the standout candidate. He's a power hitter, has demonstrated that in domestic cricket. With some of these other guys, I mean, Manish Pandey's older than that, but Manish Pandey, Virat Singh, Priyam Garg, they're top order players. Priyam Garg and Virat Singh bat 3 and 4. Manish Pandey bats 3 and 4. So they'll be doing unfamiliar roles, and it's not easy. Those power hitting positions are not easy to perform with any consistency. But I suspect it'll be between Abdul Samad and Abhishek Sharma, if only because they're spinners. As well, they both bowl a few overs of spin, and the seam bowling is quite well stacked. I think if Abdul Samad plays to his potential that we've seen in domestic cricket, he could be someone who's very, very valuable for the Sunrisers.
And what about the ultimate 3D player, Vijay Shankar? Is he past his best according to you guys?
Vijay Shankar is a decent player and a decent option. I don't think anything more than that. He may have a few games this year, and he'll be one of those guys filling a role. But I don't see him as a major factor in the Sunrisers' success or otherwise this season.
And lastly, where do you see Sunrisers finishing in the IPL this year? Do you see them as a playoff team, or do you think they just miss out? I'll let you take the first go, Monty, and then we'll ask Nakul.
Yeah, look, I think Sunrisers, again, question marks will be over, Johnny Bairstow halfway through the sort of tournament wasn't playing. Jason Roy, how much of an impact will he have? I know he's a big name. And I can't see them making the playoffs this year, unfortunately. They're the team that I just think, yeah, good match winners. They can, David Warner, Rashid Khan probably, put pressure on the side. But they're not a team that can actually, get over the line and put pressure against the other sides. I think it's sort of 2 or 3 players that I think, they rely on. And that's always been, their sort of mantra, as we call it. So, you take David Warner out of the equation. Let's just hypothetically say David Warner doesn't play, God forbid, doesn't get an injury. But let's say you put him out that equation, it's a big hole, in Sunrisers Hyderabad. So I just think that they need the overseas players. If they fire, they perform, yeah, they've got a chance, but that's a big ask.
I think that the return of Bhuvi and Bhuvi fit for the whole season, I think that alone wins them enough games alongside Rashid Khan to get them into the playoffs. Really, and really whoever you have, in theory at least, out of Roy Bairstow and Williamson in the top order, with Ridham Saha as the sort of utility pinch hitting opener. Bairstow can either open on number 4, with Holder doing a role as well. I think they've got enough to get themselves into the playoffs. I don't see them having that little bit of extra, that ability to win those games where it is about high scoring, where it is about power hitting, where it is about maximizing good conditions. I think that's where they'll come up short. So I think they will make the playoffs. I think they're probably of the three sort of established best teams, Mumbai, Delhi, and the Sunrisers. I think they're the most vulnerable to one of the middle pack having a really stunning season, because of that. Because their ceiling is at a certain level compared to those other two. But I would say from this point at the start of the season, I think they will make the playoffs, but won't win the tournament.
Yeah, from a personal standpoint, I think I mentioned this during the KKR preview, which we did, that Sunrisers in the last couple of years have pipped KKR on net run rate. So it'll be interesting to see if one of the games doesn't go their way and it goes for example, just KKR's way, who finished 5th on net run rate last couple of years. How badly does that affect Sunrisers, and if they do make the playoffs or not? But thank you guys for joining me in part 7, and we'll see in the final part. We'll cover the champions who are going for the three-peat, Mumbai Indians.